now the Legislation Amendment Bill 2022, and I support the amendments proposed by my colleague, the member for Kawana, our Shadow Minister for Industrial Relations, who is responsible for our response on this side. This is about ensuring there is a balance, because there are competing interests, but when some of the players in the market are so large, government has a role to ensure that regulation supports the customer's need, but also is fair and balanced in regard to those who are supplying those needs and meeting them with their services. We unashamedly stand up and support small businesses in our communities. They are the backbone of communities, as many of my colleagues have outlined, but particularly so when you go into regional communities where it may not be as lucrative for some of the larger operators for the sort of services that small, medium-sized family businesses deliver, but it is essential what they do. They go the extra mile, and that's true in all communities. That's true in all communities, where we see the people who are sponsoring a lot of the sporting events, the people who are sponsoring a lot of our schools and other worthy activities are often the small business people in our community, and they deserve our support. I know that with the extension of trading hours, particularly in tourism areas, there is a demand for customers to have that flexibility, and that's been a difficult balance to find. It's been difficult to find the right balance. And we recognise there are different areas that have different requirements and also different sustainability of those arrangements. So that's why there is a role for government to play in regard to trading hours. There is a role for government to play in regard to regulation and how it applies. Now, we are also, as a Liberal National Party, the party who does not support unfettered red tape, impractical application of red tape that is a burden to everyone in our community. But it is about ensuring where you have regulation, it achieves the purpose of supporting a public good, and there is a strong public good in ensuring that our small businesses have a fair go and are able to stand up against predatory practices or the fact that others are able to come to their areas and remove the profits from their area and not reinvest it back into the community. So this, we believe, is about ensuring the balance is right. And there is much that is good in this bill, but we feel that it doesn't go far enough. And certainly the moratorium of only 12 months to prevent some of those larger operators challenging trading hours through the QIRC, we believe, is not enough. In the last few years with COVID, there's been particular stresses in our community upon so many businesses. And it's naive to think that we're coming out of it yet. I think that we had hoped that would be the case. But what we're seeing now, and I know this is true in my own area where we're fortunate to have a strong tourism traffic from Brisbane and other areas, but there are businesses that are now going under that I never expected would. They survived some pretty rocky times during those first few years of COVID, and the situation where they're at now, with capital resources depleted and the other challenges they face, they're in some ways in a more perilous position than they were previously. And then you travel throughout many other parts of Queensland and you find that story is repeated and, in fact, exacerbated. Not everyone has the same story. As it was said to me early on in the pandemic, that we're all facing – I'll see if I can get this quote right. It was about the fact that we're all facing a storm, but the weather is different, or the impacts of that weather are different. And they were talking metaphorically about the impacts of COVID. But where we're at now with business, there are some have done okay because of the types of businesses and the services they offer, but that's not true of many others. And there's been a depletion of their capital resources. There's been a weariness of being able to access staff in a timely way in a very competitive space. And there's those who have found that their confidence has really been shaken, and that's really impacting their ability to continue to deliver the service they need. So there are good stories, but there are also stories, unfortunately, that are emerging where businesses are closing. So it's not the right time to remove this moratorium. I think we need to ensure, particularly in our regional areas, that our small family businesses are able to keep operating and don't find themselves with yet another attack upon the landscape upon their trading hour opportunity to make a buck, to service their community, but to have the opportunity of doing that without others coming into the community and removing profits and from that community. It's been acknowledged that one of the other amendments in this title is a provision to allow PNCs to meet online, which was undertaken certainly during the times of COVID, and I think that's just a practical measure. I think we all can reflect on how things have changed with the opportunity of using technology in a way that allows people to have access where they may not have had access before to meet online. Certainly, as members of parliament, we probably embrace that. There's no doubt, though, in-person brings about the richness of opportunity of conversations that can go beyond just the agenda, that ensure that people have strong working relationships, that they're able to communicate about many things that are in the interests of their community organisations or their business. But this is a practical measure we certainly support. But back on the amendments that we're putting, we're saying there should be a 5-year moratorium still in regard to that extension of that provision for extended trading hours for the larger operators. There is ample opportunity in the legislation that's proposed and previously to take into account the needs of special events, of certainly tourism areas. There is ample opportunity already to meet the needs both of customers and get that balance right, but we believe the case is still there to have the extra time to ensure those small to medium businesses in our regional areas who are facing still huge challenges aren't wiped out. I just want to close with this comment in regard to regulation. It is unfortunate that this government removed the Productivity Commission, took it in-house. It's virtually disappeared from public view. It's supposed to be doing a job within-house, but it's no longer that independent authority that had the opportunity of fearlessly reporting about issues of productivity. We do need to see these provisions returned. It is in our interest, all of us, to ensure that government is productive and doesn't impose measures upon people that are unproductive in a time when we're certainly facing increased inflation. Shouldn't government's regulation be held to a higher standard to assess the cost of it, to ensure that the way that regulations, where it is necessary to apply regulations and administrative measures, are done in a way that is not unnecessarily burdensome? That's why it was important to have a Productivity Commission. We should never be afraid to ensure that someone's able to speak about these issues, to challenge those issues where there are policy matters involved, but simply to take it in-house, remove and blunt the independent voice of the Productivity Commission by simply being under a bureaucratic cloak of invisibility was not good enough. We need to see better regulation in this state. We need to see productivity that respects the customers, respects businesses, respects the taxpayers, because regulation on itself, without that independent measure to ensure that productivity, the value of taxpayers' dollars and the imposition on business is tested, is unfortunate. So we will continue to say that these matters should be publicly espoused, and that's why we do talk about regulation at this point, because this was something that was raised about the impact upon cost of red tape in Queensland, and the Productivity Commission in 2021 estimated it was costing Queensland businesses up to $7 billion a year to comply with state regulation. And the cost to the Queensland government for administering and enforcing regulation was likely to be in the order of $2.6 to $3.1 billion per year, according to the Queensland Productivity Commission when it existed. And in June 2021, the QPC was transitioned into Treasury to establish the Office of Productivity and Red Tape Reduction, and back under the cloak of invisibility of the bureaucracy. That was unfortunate. Now is a time more than ever to have independent and strong voices about productivity, particularly when Queenslanders are paying so much for services. There's an inflation rate over 7% in Queensland, and that's when government should do everything it can to ensure they're not putting an unreasonable burden on business, on houses and those who pay so much just to do their job, just to keep the lights on, just to feed their families.